Well, first of all, let me say good morning to everyone. Secondly, what a great honor it is for me to be standing here. And I feel very grateful to the School of Veterinary Medicine for recommending me for this honorary degree. Thirdly, I have to say that of course I couldn't understand what was being said. Unfortunately, I can't speak Spanish, but I had an English translation. And when I read things like that, I wonder, who is this person? Who's this person they're talking about? Who's done all these amazing things? Doesn't feel like me at all. And I decided that there's actually two Janes. There's the one out there that has all these people praising her, and then there's just me who's much the same as the little girl I was when I was growing up in England all those years ago. But before I start my little talk, which hopefully will add to the reasons that I'm standing here, I'm listening to a language that I sadly don't understand. But I think I'm going to greet you in a language that most of you don't understand, and that is and other chimpanzees hearing that greeting will respond. So that was chimpanzee talk. Hello, this is me, this is Jay. When I was born, I loved animals, apparently, and I had an amazingly supportive mother. When I was 4 years old, she took me for a holiday onto a farm. And as we lived in London where there aren't so many animals, this was a wonderful experience. I still remember it. And a proper farm, where animals are out in the fields, not one of these terrible, intensive, modern factory farms. And it was at that farm that I had my first experience of observing animals in a scientific way. I was given the job of collecting hen's eggs. I kept asking everybody, but where is the hole on the hen big enough for an egg to come out? Nobody told me, to my satisfaction. I remember seeing a hen. She was brown, and she was going into one of these little hen houses where they slept at night. And I must have thought, she's going to lay an egg. So I crawled after her, and that was a mistake. She flew out, I suppose with squawks of fear. And so in my little 4-year-old mind, I'm now on the path of discovery. And I realized, I suppose, that no hen would lay an egg in this particular hen house. It's a frightening place. So I went into an empty one and hid in the back under some straw and waited and waited and waited, which was fine for me, but my mother had no idea where I was. And yet, when it was getting dark and she'd actually called the police, and she sees an excited little girl running towards the house, instead of getting angry, she sees my shining eyes and sits down to hear the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. So the reason I love that story isn't that the making of a little scientist, the curiosity, asking questions, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake, and learning patience. It was all there, and a different kind of mother might have crushed that early scientific curiosity. I didn't dream of being a scientist when I was a child. Women didn't do things like that. There was no television when I was growing up. And so I came to love books. Books and listening to older people talking about the big wide world. And of course we had the radio. It was also World War II raging while I was growing up. I used to spend hours in a second-hand bookshop We had very, very little money, couldn't afford a new book. And I was 10 years old when I bought this little book I had just saved enough pocket money, and it was called Tarzan of the Apes. That's when my dream began. I will grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. Well, everybody laughed at me. I was just a girl. Anyway, I didn't have any money. Africa was far away. People weren't doing things like that. But what my mother said to me was, if you really want something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of all opportunity, but don't give up. And that's the message that I take around the world, particularly to children in disadvantaged communities. And so many come up or write to say, Jane, I want to thank you, because you taught me that because you did it, I can do it too. Couldn't go to university when I left school. Not that my grades weren't good, they were, but we couldn't afford it. So I did a secretarial course, got a boring job, and then got invited to Kenya by a school friend. To accept that invitation, I had to earn the money, which I did by working as a waitress, because my job in London, you couldn't save up in London, and I went home. My first trip to Africa was by boat, and in those days there were no aeroplanes flying back and forth with tourists. There were a few planes, but it was very, very expensive, and I just had enough money for my return fare by boat. I stayed with my friend, and it was then that somebody said to me, Jane, if you are interested in animals, you really should meet Dr. Louis Leakey, the famous paleontologist, anthropologist. And I made an appointment to see him at the Natural History Museum in Nairobi. He was curator, and he took me all around, and I think he was impressed at how much I knew about African animals, even though I'd never been to college and I'd just come from England. And that, of course, was because I had read every book I could find about animals in Africa. At any rate, this led to him suggesting that perhaps I would agree to go and learn about chimpanzees. Would I go off into the forest in what was then Tanganyika, part of it was the last outpost of the crumbling British Empire? And of course I said yes. It was a year for him to find the money. And then the British authorities refused to allow me to go. They said, we can't have young girls wandering about in the forest, it's just not the thing. But in the end they said, all right, she can come, but she has to bring someone with her. And again it was that same amazing mother who volunteered. There was money for 6 months. She stayed for 4 of those months. And she boosted my morale because during that time, the chimpanzees, they're very conservative. They'd never seen a white ape before. And they ran away. And it was my mother who pointed out what I was learning from this peak that I found through my binoculars, beginning to learn about their social structure, the foods they eat, the calls that they make. And it was sad that she left just before that breakthrough observation, which everybody knows about now. The first chimpanzee to begin to lose his fear of me. I had named David Greybeard because of the white beard on his chin. And I saw him on this very special day, picking grass stems and using them to fish termites from their underground mounds. And I saw him break off leafy twigs, and to use those as tools, he had to strip the leaves. So he was using and making tools. This would not be exciting if you saw it today. We know that many animals can make tools and use tools. But back then, humans were defined as man the toolmaker. And we were supposed to be the only creature on the planet to use and make tools. It was that observation that was the real breakthrough, because Leakey was able to get money for me to carry on with the research. After the first 6 months, money ran out. And he went to the National Geographic Society. They agreed to support the work, and they sent a photographer Hugo and who documented what I was finding out. By this time, I'd learned quite a bit. I'd learned to identify the different chimpanzees. I named them all. There was David's closest friend, Goliath, old Flo and her family, Melissa, and all the rest, who became gradually almost like part of my family. I knew them so well. And if we look back over the nearly 60 years, we can see that there is a very important relationship that develops between a mother and her growing offspring. A development, a relationship that can last throughout the chimpanzee's life, which can be up to 60 years in the wild. The chimpanzee child has a long childhood, 5 years between live births. And during that time, the child is riding the mother's back, suckling, though less frequently, and sleeping with her at night. When the next child is born, the younger child remains, the older child remains with the mother, and close bonds develop between not only mother and offspring, but also between brothers and sisters. I have gradually learned how some males are much more motivated to attain a higher position in the male hierarchy. And by the way, males are typically dominant to all females. And I saw that the males who were competing would swagger and stand upright and bristle and put furious scowls on their face and sometimes throw rocks and wave branches, behaving actually like some human politicians today. And I will mention no names here. I realized quickly that the way chimps communicate non-verbally is by using gestures that we're very familiar with. And they use them in the same context: kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, shaking the fist, throwing rocks, begging with the palm outstretched for food, and of course using and making tools. And watching how the young ones intently watch as the elders are using these tools or performing some other actions, and gradually imitating and practicing until that becomes part of their behavioral repertoire. I was shocked to find that, like us, they have a dark and brutal side. They're capable of extreme violence and even a kind of primitive war. But also, like us, they have a gentle, loving, and truly altruistic side to their nature. So that if an infant loses his or her mother, and providing that over 3 years of independent milk, then sometimes a non-related adult will adopt them, care for them, and save their lives. If they have an older brother or sister, then that individual will take care of them. It became more and more obvious as I spent month after month in the field that yes, chimpanzees really were our closest relatives behaviorally. And that's when Vicky sent me to Cambridge University, telling me there was no time to mess with bachelors. He got me a place in Cambridge to do a PhD in ethology. I didn't even know what ethology meant, remember, I hadn't been to college. And I was nervous. So can you imagine what I felt like when many of the professors told me I'd done everything wrong? I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. That wasn't scientific. They should have had numbers. I couldn't talk about them having personality. I couldn't talk about them having minds capable of thinking. And I certainly couldn't talk about them having emotions. That was the worst of anthropomorphism, attributing human-like behavior to non-human animals. It was thought there was a difference of kind between us and all the rest of the animals. But fortunately, when I was a child, I had a wonderful teacher. A teacher who taught me that for all their knowledge in this respect, these professors were wrong. And that teacher was my dog. You can't share your life in a meaningful way with an animal, a dog, a cat, a rabbit, a guinea pig, a horse, a cow, a bird. And no, of course we are the only beings on the planet with personalities, minds, and emotions. And so I had a wonderful supervisor. I owe a lot to him, Professor Robert Hine, one of the top European ethologists. And it was he, at first my sternest critic, who came from it for 2 weeks. And afterwards he wrote to me and he said, I learned more about animal behavior in those 2 weeks than in all of the rest of my life put together. And he was the one who helped me to write about my rather revolutionary ideas in such a way that I couldn't be torn apart by scientific colleagues. Anyway, I got my degree and went back to Bombay. And that was a period probably the best in my whole life, continuing to learn about the chimpanzees, building up a research station, bringing in young students to study different aspects of chimp behavior, and above all spending hours out in the rainforest by myself with the chimpanzees and understanding about the relationship of all living things in the forest, how each little species had a part to play. And although it might seem insignificant if it became locally or maybe totally extinct, maybe it was the food of another organism, which then might also disappear. And so losing just one small species could lead to total ecosystem collapse. It was also while I was in the rainforest that I developed a really close spiritual connection with nature. I felt it all around. As I say, those were the best days of my life. So why did I leave? I left because in 1986 I helped put together a conference in America. By then there were about 6, maybe 7 field sites of people studying chimpanzees in different parts of Africa. And we wanted to bring them together so that we could ask questions like, do chimpanzees behave in exactly the same way in different habitats? Do they use the same tools, the same gestures? Are there differences in social structure? And that was the main purpose of this. And indeed, we did learn the differences. And because one definition of human culture is behavior passed from one generation to the next through observation, imitation, and practice, we can certainly say chimpanzees have their own primitive cultures. We have, however, a session on conditions in some practice situations, and I couldn't sleep after that, having seen secretly filmed footage of our closest living relatives in biomedical research laboratories, our closest relatives, whom I knew so well in the past, who are so like us in 5-foot by 5-foot cages. And we were there because biologically it was known how like us they are. But the scientists who believed they could test vaccines and cures on these animals because they were so like us biologically, they refused to even consider the fact that there are similarities in psychology and behavior. And it was a shock. And we also had a session on conservation. And in all these different field sites, there were photographs or film of the forests being destroyed, chimpanzee numbers decreasing, the beginning of the bushmeat trade, the commercial hunting of wild animals for food, the pet trade, shooting mothers to sell their babies locally as pets or overseas in zoos, circuses, and in those days, medical research. So I went to that conference as a scientist with a wonderful life ahead of me. I left as an activist. People say, was that a hard decision? I don't think it was a decision, it was just a change in me. And so I knew I had to do something to try to help, but what was I to do? I managed to get permission to go into a couple of the medical research laboratories. And I never forget looking into the eyes of one of these males. He was about 30 years old. And there he was in his bed, below him and above him. He had nothing to do. He was by himself. He was in a room with a total of 10 males, all in their separate, isolated cages. And as I looked into his eyes and thought about 30-year-old chimpanzees at Gombe and the kind of life that they led, there were tears rolling down into my mask. And Jojo reached out a gentle finger and touched one of those tears. So it's been a long, long struggle. But finally, right across the United States, all chimpanzees used in medical research are either in sanctuaries or waiting to go to sanctuaries when the money runs out. And it's not just for ethical reasons, although those were my reasons for fighting, but it was because the new director of National Institutes of Health, having talked to me, sent out a group of 11 scientists that took 18 months, and they examined all of the experiments that were being done in the different NIH laboratories. 2 questions they had to answer. Is this experiment beneficial to human health? Second, is it potentially beneficial to human health? And after 18 months, the scientists came back with their deliberation. Not one of those experiments was either beneficial or potentially beneficial to human health. And this applies to many other aspects of research on different animals as well. Well, what about conservation? I got a little money and visited 6 different African countries where chimpanzees live. And I learned a lot about the plight of the chimpanzees. In particular, one of the most moving things was seeing infants whose mothers had been shot, either for the animal trafficking or to sell as pets. Or to eat, because in some African countries, chimpanzees are eaten. And it's illegal, but nobody cared. And I saw the first infant for sale in a bustling African market, out in the hot sun, curled up on top of a small wire cage with a chain around his neck. Fortunately, we were able to get the help of the American Embassy, who went to the Minister of Environment. We got permission to confiscate that little infant, and that was the beginning of our sanctuary program. We have 2 major sanctuaries in Africa today, and Rebecca, who we've been hearing about, who's sitting opposite me over there, and I suspect is the one who proposed me with this honorary degree. She runs it along with her husband, Fernando, who's here somewhere as well. So, while I'm learning about the plight of the chimpanzees, I'm also learning about the problems faced by so many people living in and around chimpanzee habitat, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education facilities, and the destruction of the environment as human populations grow and the people move further into the forest to have more land for developing their villages or for growing their crops, and very often taking destructive cattle and goats with them. And it came to a head when I flew over Gombe National Park. When I began in 1960, that tiny 135 square kilometre of land was part of the great equatorial forest belt that stretched across Africa from East Africa to the west coast. When I flew over in a small plane in 1990, I looked down on a tiny island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills. More people there than the land could support. They had overused the farmland that was infertile. In their desperation to grow more food, they had cut down trees even on the steep slopes. Terrible soil erosion. The little streams getting silted up. Too poor to buy food from elsewhere. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people, we can't even try to save the chimpanzees. So I started, the Goodall started in Tanzania, a program we called Take Care or Takare, very holistic program, and beginning by choosing a little group of local Tanzanians, not a bunch of arrogant white people marching into a poor village and telling them what we were going to do to make their lives better. No. Tanzanians, local ones, sitting down asking the villagers, what can we do to make your lives better? Grow more food. That meant restoring fertility to the overused farmland without poisonous chemicals. They wanted better education and health facilities. We worked with the local Tanzanian authorities, who should have been working in these areas anyway. Then we introduced water management programs. We introduced microcredit, particularly for women, based on Mohammed Yunus's Korean Bank, where women could ask for tiny loans for projects which had to be environmentally sustainable. And we found scholarships for girls to keep them in school after puberty, because all around the world it's known that as women's education improves, so family size tends to drop. We provided family planning information. Politically incorrect? The people welcomed it. Gone were the days when large families could support their parents in their old age. There wasn't the land left. There were too many people living on it. And this information, again delivered by local Tanzanians, was warmly embraced and has begun to make a difference. Because of this, the villagers have set aside land in their land use management plan around the Gombe National Park, and the forest is beginning to return. Because of us, they've realized that we're not just protecting the environment for the chimpanzees and other wildlife, but for their own future. Because if they carry on destroying the land like this, what's in it for their children and grandchildren? We now have this program in all 72 villages throughout the range of Tanzania's wild chimpanzees. And we have village volunteers trained to be forest monitors, to monitor conditions in the forest reserves where most of the chimpanzees live, not protected. They're now protected because the villagers have understood through education programs. And this kind of conservation, community-based conservation, is now operating in 6 other African countries, including Senegal, where JGI Spain is working, and including in the Republic of Congo, where our Chimponga Sanctuary run by Rebecca and Fernando. And so it's truly helping to save chimpanzees, but it's also improving the lives of so many hundreds and hundreds of the people living in the area. It costs a lot of money. I began traveling to raise awareness, try and raise funds. I was meeting many young people who seemed to have little hope for the future. They were mostly just apathetic, not seeming to care. Sometimes they were angry, sometimes they were deeply depressed. And when I spoke to them, they said, well, you've harmed our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. This is saying we haven't inherited this planet from our parents, we've borrowed it from our children, but we have not been borrowing our children's future. We've been stealing it, and we're still stealing it today. That brings me to the big difference between us, chimpanzees, and other animals. Yes, other animals are way more intelligent than we used to think. And it's not just chimpanzees and other great apes and monkeys, but it's also elephants and lions. It's also birds. We now know so much about bird intelligence. And I can tell you how intelligent pigs are. Please Google, not Picasso, but Pig-Casso, and you will be amazed. I won't tell you what you'll see. And now we know about the intelligence of the octopus, and even bumblebees can be trained to do certain things, and other bumblebees not trained can do the same little task just by watching the trained bumblebees. So yes, there is so much out there for young people wanting to study animal behavior. What an exciting time it is. But at the same time, we humans are destroying the world for their future. So again, the difference. I believe the greatest difference, and of course there are many, but the greatest difference between us, chimpanzees, and other animals is this explosive development of our internet. Just think of some technology that's been developed today by the human brain. When I was a child, it was science fiction, and now it's with us. And as we learn more and more about the plight of the planet today, more and more scientists are bending their mind to creating technology that will allow us to live in greater harmony with Mother Nature. And we as individuals are beginning to understand ways in which we can leave lighter ecological footprints as we go through the world each day. But to go back to the young people, when they said we're harming their future and there's nothing we can do about it, are they right about that? There are scientists who say we've set off along a path from which there is no return. But there are other scientists who believe, as I do, that there's a window of time when if, but only if, we get together soon, we can start healing some of the harm that we've inflicted. And I think all of you here, being in a university, you know what I'm talking about when I say that we're harming the planet. You know about the pollution of air, water, and land. You know how we're destroying the two great lungs of the planet, the forests and the oceans, both of which can absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and breathe out oxygen. And of course, carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas. These gases that form a blanket around the globe and trap the heat of the sun, which has led to changing climates around the world. Of course, the main contributor to the greenhouse gases is the reckless burning of fossil fuel. But there's another gas that is gradually increasing, and that's methane. And the main producer of methane gas today is all these animals in these intensive industrial farms. And they produce methane during digestion, as all of us do. There's also tremendous damage to the environment because these billions of animals cramped into these truly terrible places have to be fed. And huge areas of habitat are destroyed to grow the grain, and fossil fuel is used to take the grain from the fields to the animals to the abattoir, the meat to the table. Water is wasted, changing vegetable food into vegetable protein, into animal protein. And antibiotics given regularly to all these animals to keep them alive, not because they're sick. The bacteria are building up resistance. And you hear of people today dying from these superbugs, bacteria that are resistant to all known human antibiotics. What's going on with us? Why are we doing this to the planet today and future generations tomorrow? It seems to me there's some disconnect between this clever brain and the human heart, love and compassion. And we're making decisions based on how will this help me now, my family now, my next electoral campaign, the next shareholders meeting, instead of how will this decision affect future generations. And I truly believe that only when head and heart work in harmony can we attain our true human potential. But no wonder the young people were depressed, angry, apathetic, and not just the young people. As we learn more and more about what's happening, we become more and more depressed or anguished or desperate. I started the Roots and Shoots program in 1991 in Tanzania with 12 high school students. And right back then we decided the main message would be every single one of us matters. Every single one of us makes some impact on the planet every single day. And we have a choice what kind of difference are we going to make. That Roots and Shoots program is now in almost 80 countries. It's growing fast in Spain, thanks to Federico and his team here in Spain. And because of understanding the interconnectedness of all things, we decided from the start every group would choose projects to help people, to help animals, to help the environment, because it's all interconnected. It's my greatest reason for hope. Young people around the world are changing the world. We've got 2,000 groups across mainland China. And that's important when you think of the role that China is playing in the world today with the destruction of the environment. And people in China are coming up to me and saying, of course I care about the environment. I was in Roots and Shoots in primary school. Of course I care about animals. I watched your geographic films about the chimpanzees in Roots and Shoots in primary school. And so, as I'm speaking, there are groups around the world rolling up their sleeves, getting out with passion, dedication, determination, and having fun at the same time, and helping us to move towards a better relationship with Mother Nature. My next reason for hope is this human brain. As we've seen, we're creating more and more ways of living in harmony with nature. My third reason is the resilience of nature and places that have been destroyed and once again support life, as the trees coming back around Bombay, no more bare hills. Animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance, and that's happening here in Spain as well. And finally, the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what seems to be impossible and won't give up and succeed. And it's what keeps me going, aged nearly 85, 300 days a year around the world giving lectures like this. It's because I meet so many incredible people doing incredible things. If you've been at the beginning of Chimpunga Sanctuary as I was, and you saw the difference that Rebecca and Fernando have made, not only looking after the chimpanzees, but protecting the environment and educating the youth. And these people, with their projects, I meet everywhere. And I think the most important thing I want to leave you with is that every single one of us has that same indomitable spirit. But some people don't realize it. They don't develop it. They don't let it out into the world. And it is desperately important that each one of us plays our role now and tries to make the world a little bit better every single day. So I thank you for this wonderful honor that you've given me today. I thank you for an opportunity of speaking to you and delivering a message that I feel is very important. I hope that a Roots and Shoots group will start growing in this wonderful university. And finally, to all of you, thank you.